Imagine a man coming home at 8:47 on a Friday night. He unlocks the door. Silence. No one asks how his day went. No one is waiting for him. No messages saying, "Where are you?" He drops his keys on the table, takes off his shoes, and walks into a perfectly quiet apartment. There is food in the refrigerator. His favorite show is ready. Nobody needs anything from him. And strangely, he likes it. At least, that's what he tells himself. His friends occasionally ask, "So, are you seeing anyone?" He laughs. "Nah, I'm good." And maybe he really is. But then there are nights when he stays awake longer than necessary. He scrolls through Instagram. He watches couples posting vacations. Someone from high school just got married. Another friend had a baby. Someone else is celebrating an anniversary. He puts the phone down, turns off the light, and the apartment becomes quiet again. So what is actually happening inside the mind of a man who chooses to live alone without a girlfriend or wife? Is he lonely, independent, emotionally unavailable, peaceful, avoiding commitment? Or could he simply have discovered a way of living that most people don't understand? Here's where the psychology gets interesting. Because a man living alone isn't necessarily a man who has failed to find love. Sometimes he has found something else. And sometimes, beneath that independence, there is a story nobody sees. Let's uncover it. Because the first thing you need to understand is that solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. A man can be alone without feeling lonely. And another man can sleep beside someone every night and feel completely alone. That's one of the strangest contradictions in modern relationships. We often assume companionship automatically creates happiness, but psychological research suggests something more complicated. The quality of connection matters more than simply having another person nearby. Think about a man who comes home to a peaceful apartment. He controls the temperature. He decides what to eat. He chooses what to watch. Nobody criticizes him. Nobody demands emotional explanations. Nobody starts an argument because he forgot an anniversary. There is no relationship drama, no jealousy, no negotiation, no emotional performance. For some men, that feels like freedom. And after experiencing enough chaos, freedom can become addictive. This is where most people make their first mistake. They see a single man and assume he must be desperate for a relationship. Not necessarily. Some men genuinely enjoy their independence. They develop routines, they exercise, work on their careers, play video games, travel, read, build businesses, spend time with friends, pursue hobbies, and slowly they discover something unexpected. Their life actually works. They don't wake up every morning thinking, "I need a girlfriend." They wake up thinking about their goals, and that changes the psychology of dating. Because when a person doesn't feel desperate for connection, they can become much more selective about who they allow into their life. This is where attachment becomes fascinating. Some men who live alone have developed what psychologists might describe as avoidant tendencies. They value independence. They don't like depending on others. They may become uncomfortable when relationships become emotionally intense. When someone gets too close, they may feel trapped, so they retreat. A woman might say, "Why don't you open up?" He says. "I'm just private," she says. "You never tell me what you're feeling," he says. "I don't like talking about everything." Eventually, she becomes frustrated. He becomes even more distant. She interprets the distance as lack of love. He interprets her need for closeness as pressure. And suddenly, two people who might actually care about each other are speaking completely different emotional languages. But here's what almost nobody realizes. Living alone can reinforce this pattern. When you're alone, you don't have to negotiate your emotions with anyone. If you're angry, you can be angry privately. If you're sad, you can distract yourself. If you're stressed, you don't have to explain it. If you want silence, you get silence. The problem is that independence can become so comfortable that intimacy begins to feel like an invasion. And that's when solitude stops being a choice and starts becoming a defense mechanism. But not every solitary man is avoidant. Some are simply exhausted. Think about modern life: career pressure, long working hours, financial uncertainty, dating apps, ghosting, situationships, mixed signals, endless texting, emotional burnout. A man can go through 5 years of disappointing relationships and eventually think, "You know what? I'm done." Not because he hates women, not because he doesn't believe in love, because he doesn't want another emotional project. He wants peace, and peace becomes extremely valuable after chaos. Imagine a man who spent 3 years in a relationship where every disagreement became an argument, every argument became a threat, Every silence became punishment. Every social media interaction became a jealousy issue. Eventually, the relationship ends. At first, he misses her. Then something strange happens. He starts sleeping better. He stops checking his phone. His anxiety decreases. He gets back into the gym. He reconnects with friends. He starts working on a business idea he abandoned years ago. Months later, someone asks, "Don't you want another relationship?" He thinks about it, then says, "Honestly, I'm not sure." That answer tells you something. Sometimes a man doesn't avoid relationships because he doesn't want love. He avoids relationships because he has finally experienced what life feels like without emotional chaos. And once you've tasted peace, you become careful about what you invite back into your life. But then something unexpected happens. The longer a man lives alone, the more adapted he becomes to his independence. He develops what we might call a personal ecosystem. His apartment has a certain order. His mornings follow a routine. His weekends belong to him. His money is his. His time is his. His decisions are his. Then someone enters the picture. Suddenly there are compromises. Can we go somewhere tonight? Why don't you call more? Can we spend Christmas with my family? Why didn't you tell me that? Can you change your schedule? None of these requests are necessarily unreasonable, but psychologically, they represent something enormous: the loss of complete autonomy. And this is where some men struggle. They don't fear women. They fear losing themselves. Esther Perel has explored this tension extensively. Humans want both security and freedom, closeness and individuality. We want someone to love us, but we don't want to feel consumed by the relationship. We want intimacy, but we also want an identity outside the relationship. A healthy relationship learns to balance both. An unhealthy relationship forces one person to disappear, and some men would rather remain alone than risk disappearing again. Now consider another type of solitary man, the man who says he doesn't want a wife because he doesn't want responsibility. At first, it sounds simple, but listen carefully. Sometimes "I don't want responsibility" really means I don't trust myself to handle emotional responsibility. Marriage requires communication, compromise, patience, financial planning, conflict resolution, emotional availability, and eventually, family responsibilities. Some men look at all of that and quietly think, "I don't think I'm ready." That isn't necessarily weakness. In fact, recognizing that you're not ready can be more mature than entering a marriage because everyone around you expects it. But there is another side. Some men become so comfortable avoiding responsibility that they never develop the skills required for partnership. They say, "I'm happy alone," and maybe they are, but whenever emotional intimacy appears, they disappear. Whenever someone asks for commitment, they panic. Whenever conflict appears, they withdraw. Eventually, they don't simply live alone. They become psychologically organized around avoiding dependence, and that distinction matters, because choosing solitude is different from being trapped inside it. Here's where the story becomes much bigger. Here's what makes this bigger than just one relationship. Society has quietly taught men some contradictory lessons. Be successful, be strong. Don't need anyone. Don't show weakness. Provide, lead, stay independent. But then, build a family, be emotionally available, communicate, be vulnerable, be a great husband, be a great father, be ambitious, but make time for your family. And somewhere in the middle, a man can become confused. What exactly is he supposed to be? A provider? A partner? A protector? An emotionally expressive person? All of them? This confusion can create a strange form of modern loneliness. A man may have money, a career, a nice apartment, a car, friends, freedom, but still have nobody who truly knows him, nobody who knows what keeps him awake, nobody who knows what he secretly fears, nobody who hears the thoughts he never says aloud. And that's the part people don't see. A man can be surrounded by people and still live emotionally alone. John Gottman's relationship research repeatedly emphasizes the importance of emotional connection, responsiveness, and turning toward a partner's bids for connection. In ordinary language, people need to feel noticed, not admired by thousands, not liked on Instagram, not validated by strangers, seen. And that's why some men who live alone eventually experience a strange contradiction. They love their freedom, but occasionally miss being deeply known. They don't necessarily want someone in their apartment every night. They want someone who understands them when they are there. That's different, and it explains why some men remain single for years while still wanting love. They aren't necessarily searching for more attention, they're searching for emotional safety. Think about the man who receives a message at midnight. Are you awake? He looks at the phone. It's been months since someone genuinely cared whether he was awake. He smiles. Not because he's desperate, because for one moment, the silence doesn't feel quite as heavy. This is where modern dating becomes complicated. Dating apps create endless options, but endless options don't necessarily create meaningful connection. Sometimes they create decision fatigue. Swipe, match, message, ghost, match again, repeat. Eventually, a man may start thinking of dating like shopping. What are my options? What does she offer? Is there someone better? And the more he searches, the harder it becomes to appreciate anyone, because the brain adapts to constant novelty. Helen Fisher's research into romantic love and the brain has explored how desire, reward, motivation, and attachment interact. Romantic attraction can feel like anticipation, the possibility of something, the mystery, the uncertainty. But long-term partnership is different. Eventually, novelty becomes familiarity, and familiarity requires a different psychological skill: appreciation, patience, commitment. This is why some men love dating but struggle with relationships. They enjoy the beginning, the attention, the chemistry, the excitement. Then reality arrives. Someone has needs, someone gets sick, someone has a bad day, someone needs reassurance, someone disagrees, someone says, "Can we talk?" And suddenly, the fantasy requires emotional labor. That's the moment a man's relationship with solitude becomes revealing. Does he return to his apartment because he genuinely prefers being alone, or because intimacy requires skills he never learned? That's the question, and there is no universal answer. Some men thrive alone. They become more disciplined, more self-aware, more peaceful. They learn to cook, manage money, maintain a home, build friendships, travel, explore. They become comfortable in their own company, and that can be incredibly healthy. Because if you cannot tolerate your own presence, you may enter relationships simply to escape yourself. And that's dangerous. A relationship should add connection to your life. It shouldn't be your only source of identity. But there is another danger. A man can become so self-sufficient that nobody gets close enough to contribute anything. He tells himself, "I don't need anyone." Maybe he doesn't. But humans are social creatures. The ability to need someone without becoming dependent on them is a powerful form of emotional maturity. Brené Brown's work on vulnerability offers an important perspective here. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the willingness to be seen without controlling the outcome. For a solitary man, that can be terrifying, because alone, he controls the environment. With another person, he can't control everything. They might misunderstand him. They might reject him. They might leave. They might hurt him. And that's the risk of intimacy. You don't get closeness without vulnerability, and you don't get vulnerability without risk. So perhaps the most interesting question isn't, why doesn't this man have a girlfriend or wife? Maybe the better question is, what does being alone protect him from? And what does being alone prevent him from experiencing? Those two questions can reveal almost everything. Maybe solitude protects him from heartbreak, but it also protects him from intimacy. Maybe it protects his peace, but it might also protect his emotional walls. Maybe it gives him freedom, but it can also make compromise feel unbearable. Maybe he's genuinely happy. Or maybe he's become so good at saying "I'm fine" that nobody realizes he isn't. And sometimes, even he doesn't realize it. So here's the bigger picture. A man living alone without a girlfriend or wife isn't automatically lonely. He isn't automatically damaged. He isn't automatically afraid of commitment. And he certainly isn't automatically unhappy. Some men choose solitude because they value freedom. Some are recovering from painful relationships. Some are focused on careers. Some simply haven't met someone they want to build a life with. Some are emotionally avoidant. Some are deeply lonely. And some are a mixture of all of these things, because human beings don't fit neatly into categories. The real psychological question is whether solitude is expanding a man's life or shrinking it. If living alone gives him peace, purpose, friendships, health, creativity, and freedom, that's one story. If living alone becomes an excuse to avoid vulnerability, rejection, responsibility, and emotional growth, that's another. And perhaps the healthiest man isn't the one who desperately needs a relationship or the one who proudly declares that he needs nobody. It's the man who can say, "I am okay alone, but I am also capable of letting someone in." That's strength, because love isn't supposed to rescue you from yourself, and solitude isn't supposed to become a prison disguised as freedom. Go back to that apartment. 8:47 on a Friday night. The man walks through the door. The room is silent. And maybe, for the first time, we don't immediately assume something is wrong. Maybe he's happy. Maybe he's healing. Maybe he's building. Maybe he's waiting. Maybe he's afraid. Maybe he's simply living differently from everyone around him. The silence doesn't tell us which one. Only he knows. And perhaps that's the greatest psychological mystery of all. Sometimes the loneliest person in the room is the one surrounded by people. And sometimes the man sitting alone at home is completely at peace. The difference isn't whether someone is alone, it's whether they are alone by choice or alone because they've forgotten how to let someone close. If this helped you understand relationships a little better, subscribe and join us. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and until next time, keep learning what really drives human connection.